Charlie Kirk's goal, I don't want to say what it was, is straightforward. Americans should celebrate their patriotism rather than hide it. Americans should exercise their rights rather than cower from civic duty, and Americans should stand by one another at all times in order to advance the values that have been battered but unbroken from 1776 until the present day. In their supreme wisdom, our founding fathers placed our right to speak, assemble, and worship freely at the beginning of our Bill of Rights. Charlie Kirk loved the Constitution, and he loved the First and Second Amendment. And Judy Kupperman will introduce our speaker. Hi, everybody.
Today's speaker is a neighbor to us in Collier County. Her firm, the law offices of Kristina Soto, located in Fort Myers. As the managing attorney, Ms. Soto says she's honored to work with those in the community facing traumatic and emotional legal matters involving family, juveniles, and criminal law. Before opening her own law firm, Ms. Soto was a supervising attorney and legal training attorney for the Office of the Public Defender, where she served as an assistant public defender attorney for more than 11 years. She now sits on the board of the Lee County Bar Association. And on a personal note, she's homeschooling her 8-year-old daughter, and she also enjoys photography. So with September 17th being Constitution Day, we've asked her to speak on the Constitution and its effect on criminal law. Won't you please welcome Ms. Kristina Soto.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. This is such an honor, just this whole week. And, speaking about Charlie Kirk, I hope I don't cry up here, but I am going to say that I know my father, who is deceased for the past 20 years, he's going to be celebrating in heaven, knowing that I'm here at the Republican Club. He was a strong member of his Republican Club. He volunteered in the community, and he would be very happy to see me here because I gave him a lot of HELL when I was a teen and a young lady because I was a bleeding heart liberal. Don't stone me. Don't stone me. Keep your forks and your knives down, okay? And he said, when you get out in the real world, when you have to pay your own bills, when you have to make it, when you have to get out there, you're gonna change your mind. I'm like, no, not me. And he was right. He was right. So now I'm a 2-time Trump voter, MAGA millennial. And I'm coming out of the public defender's office, which, as you can probably assume, doesn't have too many Republicans, okay? So thank you so much for having me here. I do own my own practice. I practice mostly in family, criminal, and juvenile law. And when the Florida Bar, so there's a great resource with the Florida Bar, you can make a request and they will put it out to the entire state of attorneys on if you need an attorney to come speak at one of your events. And I said, oh, look at this event. I would love to come here. This is my jam, Constitution. Yes, let's do this. And I responded back to the Florida Bar and I said, oh, I would love to do this. I'm in criminal defense. And they're like, no. They want a constitutional law attorney. I'm like, well, criminal law is constitutional law. And they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, yeah, right? Yeah, right. I qualify. So I almost was like, no, I qualify. Pick me. I can do it. So again, I'm really super happy to be here. I mostly operate out of Fort Myers, Florida. And I did leave some cards. If anybody has, one of my favorite things to do is give me your best hypothetical question. Meaning, I'm not giving you legal advice, the whole disclaimer. Hypothetical question about family law, constitutional law, anything you have. And at the end, if I get to some of those questions, I know I was given quite a few questions by this group, not necessarily in my fields, but I will try to touch on everything that I can. So Constitution Week is coming up next week, September 17th through the 23rd. And reiterating what some of the speakers have already said, don't just get out in the community. Ask to speak at your local school. How can I get into the schools? I'm a mom of 3, a 8-year-old and a 3-year-old. And since COVID, it was really challenging. I was in a school district, public school in Lee County, and it was very difficult to figure out, how can I just volunteer at the school? We really felt like we were blocked out of the schools for a long period of time. Slowly, we have been able to get back in there. And I was, we were at a Title I school last year with my daughter, and I made it a point. I'm like, I'm going to get in there. I'm going to volunteer. The teacher and the staff are doing the best that they can. It's really a dark time, very dark. The things that I heard first graders talking about, it's really horrific. They are very susceptible to the devil and the devil's work through these devices, through the phone. And the government is not going to come save us, okay? We are the government. We have to save ourselves. We have to get in there. We have to show young people. Young people are so lonely. The last 4 years, I came out of maternity leave and I said I want to open my own law firm. I got involved, worked for a nonprofit briefly, and I've gotten involved in a lot of women's groups. And women my age and younger, they are so lonely. So lonely. Do they have a friend? Can they count on somebody? Can somebody bring me a meal? Can somebody help hold this baby? There's so many people, and we have so many friends online, but people are just feeling more and more and more isolated. So I really highly suggest, I literally, just from what happened this past week, I formed my own Fort Myers Christian homeschooling co-op with a group of women. And I said, hey, I'll do a class for kids anytime. Let's do it in our group, in our small group. It doesn't have to be something big. I also said, hey, teacher, at my son's school, I'll come and speak. And they were like, definitely, let's do it. So get in there, ask to get in there, and please try to get into the schools, because the youth are very impressionable, and that's how they're getting in. And a lot of good people are leaving the school district. There's a huge homeschooling movement where a lot of great people are actually leaving the school district, which is leaving vulnerable families and kids alone. And that's probably a scarier situation, honestly. So I put in here, I wanted to touch on the Constitution because I'm very passionate about it. And I actually became more passionate about it working in criminal defense. Working in criminal defense, my faith got deeper. My love of the Constitution got deeper. And as a criminal defense attorney, we were constantly fighting for the Constitution. And we were the most hated people on earth. Judges hated me. I gave everybody a lot of what, but judges hated me, prosecutors hated me, cops hated me, my own clients, who the taxpayer pays for me to represent them, they hated me. Everybody hated me. It's like the world's most challenging job. And it's very traumatic. The jobs of police, EMS, prosecutors, public defenders, they get a little more love. They might get some donuts, maybe get a little bit more money. But it's a really traumatic job. So it takes an effect. And, when we're saying, oh, hey, government, do this, government, do that, we're exhausted. People in government are exhausted, and we need the community to get more involved. I'm going to get more into the constitutional amendments I wanted to touch on, but one of the main things that affected me in criminal defense was working with domestic violence victims. So working in criminal defense, indigent defense of the public defender's office, people can't not afford to hire their own counsel, and it's provided for them under the Constitution. And I'll hear some conservatives sometimes say, well, why do I have to pay for that? Why are the taxpayers paying for that? Some of the biggest influences on me that turned me to conservatism, turned me towards becoming a Republican, were very strong advocates of the Constitution. People who were really well versed in their faith, in the Constitution. They love the Constitution. They did not speak against the Constitution. In these times of such traumatic and horrific situations, the pendulum is just swinging and swinging and swinging. And the Constitution is that road that we can walk on, that we have to teach the youth to respect that and to love that. And that's what's made this country great. And so the preamble of the Constitution, just reading it out, what was the purpose of the Constitution? We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. We're not perfect. We're not going to be perfect. We're broken people in a broken world. We're just trying to do the best that we can. Government's only trying to do the best that they can, but there's limitations. Establish justice. Ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, secure the blessings of the liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And then the preamble of the Declaration of Independence, which we hear a little bit more. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. We are a country based on God. Period. And we need to live that out, and we need to walk that out, and we need to show the youth why that matters and why we live that way, why we want to choose to live that way. And that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're not guaranteed happiness. We're not guaranteed anything. We are guaranteed the pursuit of happiness. That means that we have to get up and get going and walk that out. Walk that out every single day, every single choice. Our generation right now, with a lot of women that I speak to and younger generations, we're addicted to this. You guys all see it, but some of us adults are not much better than the kids. We throw our kids on this to get a break so we can go like this. Check your phone. Check the time that you're spending. You'd be shocked to realize how much time you're wasting on this. 4 hours a day? 6 hours a day? Oh, we're working. We're important. We have friends. We have to contact all these people superficially. If you put this down, I took social media off my phone, which you see a lot of young people doing that. I've taken all that off my phone and said, hey, I need to look at my kids in the eye. I was just at an event with my children for a homeschool event for gymnastics. And the way the kids would look at their parents, Mom, do you see me? Mom, do you see me? Look at me. Do you see me? And we're all like this. We're so important. We're so important with our phones and our news and our activities and what we want to do. You don't have to do much to make a huge impact. And I start with your family, your spouse, your children, your grandchildren. The impact you can make there might seem minor, but it's really tremendous if we put our eyes on the right thing. So with the Constitution, obviously, the First and Second Amendment, we're dealing with both of those, clashing in the last week. First Amendment for, criminal law purposes, just with the freedom of speech, the right to assemble. One example came to my mind when we were dealing with the panhandling ordinances, where we're seeing an influx of the homeless, begging for money in the streets. We don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that person. Oh, it's disgusting. They're making me feel uncomfortable. And, and a lot of them were merely holding signs, which it was interesting because I think the ACLU came in and then huge pockets, huge groups of homeless were in the streets. It was very interesting in Fort Myers a couple years back while this was being challenged. It may have been done on purpose. And they were merely holding signs that say, God bless you. We don't want to see that. Well, we have to be able to see that and deal with that in order to preserve free speech. So, it's going to cut both ways, so when you say something or, act against the Constitution, it's going to come back and bite us. And we saw that over the last 4 years on how bad that can get very quickly if we don't, walk the line and walk out our constitutional principles. Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, like I said before, the government's not going to come save us. Countless times as a criminal defense attorney, I was representing the victim of domestic violence. So many times I was the defense attorney for the victim of domestic violence. How did that occur? They were isolated, lies, and they end up getting arrested while the perpetrator is out with the kids, with the pets, with the house, selling things or whatever, while my client, the victim, was stuck in jail without anybody to help her most of the times, not always. But, we have to empower those people, the victims of crime, to get involved. That's where we're seeing a lot of problems in some of these bigger cities. Crime victims are not speaking out. They're not coming to court. They're not participating as witnesses. One of the most detrimental things I've seen here in our area is Baker Acts. People who are severely mentally ill, they are in great danger of hurting themselves or others. They come in under a Baker Act and they leave the next day. They're back out on the streets the next day or within a few days because the state is not bringing the proper witnesses to prove up the allegations by their family members to secure these people longer and try to get them more help and more services. So, that was a big issue. There was a lot of, my girlfriend represented people coming through as defendants in the Baker Act. And she was just like, I have to do my job and I have to stay in my lane. Everybody has to stay in their lane, right? So, but it was all hearsay. You have family members, witnesses, people in the community that need to come to court, that need to participate. They need to know how the system works. And a lot of people who talk to me are like, well, can't you just say this and can't you just do this? I'm like, that's not evidence. That can't come in to a court of law. People don't know how the system works. They don't know how evidence can come in. They don't realize the importance of them coming to court to speak to the judge and actually provide testimony and evidence. And you see that in bigger cities where crime victims are very scared. Their lives might be at risk by coming into the court system to testify against their perpetrators. And that's how these people are winding back out on the streets. So oftentimes with reductions in charges because the prosecutors can't prove the cases. They don't have the evidence or the people to be participating. And we would see that in domestic violence. They had their own docket where that was one of the only places where speedy trial was like observed. We went from arraignment to docket sounding to trial call with 90 days to get to trial, which is not, that's very fast. That's very fast because they knew that a huge majority would not testify against perpetrators and that the case would get dropped and they couldn't let these cases backlog. And that leaves our community in serious, grave danger. With criminal law, we also get really involved with the Fourth, Fifth, Sixth Amendments. We live that out every day. And, against Fourth Amendment, securing your person's house's papers against unreasonable search and seizures, getting probable cause for a warrant is like so easy. It's incredibly easy. Plus you have all these exceptions to the warrant requirement. So it's really easy to overcome that for justice. Fifth Amendment, it talks about double jeopardy, pleading the fifth. Pleading the fifth is seen like this is some bad thing. Oh, they're pleading the fifth. They wouldn't plead the fifth unless they were guilty as a dog. Like, okay, well, in trials, I would ask judges all the time, prohibit anybody from even saying that at all, because it was meant to inflame the jury to hold it against your client, and you couldn't use the Constitution in that way. So being deprived of life, liberty, and property without due process, I'm hearing a lot of chatter about immigration and why do we have to provide due process of law, and that's not fair, and how much money and resources do we need from that? The system is kind of slow to react, but we actually have a lot of ability to react and move people and resources to get the job done. So let's just get it done without speaking poorly about the Constitution, which is not going to help our cause. Let me know what time I'm at, because I thought I put on my timer, but I don't think I did. Also, the pleading the fifth, I noted that in juvenile justice, I worked in juvenile justice. They were my most honest clients. God bless them. They told the truth. And you get in real big trouble when you tell the truth in criminal law. Isn't that horrible? That's horrible. When you lie, when you don't talk, when you don't cooperate, you get bigger breaks. And that's what we're teaching criminals. People who come in and out of the system over and over again, we're teaching them, lie better, hide better. That's not what we want to be teaching. Criminals cannot know the Constitution better than us, okay? And kids, they were so truthful. And I had one really bad case where I'm like, are you sure there's not something else? No, I'm truthful. I'm like, oh, okay, well, then. Not much to do there. But, we want, for going back to free speech, we want the crazies to come out. We want them talking. We want them posting all over online, because then we can see them very clearly. We don't want to hide that. And as for the Sixth Amendment, I would be in trial all the time trying to vigorously cross-examine someone and confront them. And prosecutors would be like, oh, you can't get into that. And judges are like, yeah, can't get into that. And I'm like, You should let me get into all of it. Because jurors don't has anybody served on a jury? Jurors want to know everything. Why are you blocking that? Why are you hiding that? Why is the judge hiding that? I want to know what you're talking about. And I'm like, and that was one of my, I don't want to say a trick, but it was like, I want them to not trust you and not trust you. Jurors don't like when they don't feel like they're getting the full story. So I say, let it all in. Let's go. The truth is going to come out, and the crazies do show themselves. I love pro se people. I'm family lawyers love pro se people, and I'm like, what? I love these people because they just blah, blah, blah. Like, perfect. Let's just get down to it quickly. So the way it's all playing out, we are all in our lanes. We have to operate in our lanes. We're doing the best that we can. And you have to trust the people who are operating in the systems. A lot of people are giving judges a lot of heat right now. Judges are facing an incredible amount of a surge in death threats. And we just cannot be. We have to speak well of people who are operating in the system and trust. There's a lot of stuff that we don't see. And we have to trust that the people who are working in those fields are doing the absolute best that they can, because they are under very difficult circumstances. So let me move forward a little bit. The Sixth Amendment also guarantees the assistance of counsel. So like during COVID, we were the first ones back. Our job was constitutionally protected. We were those essential workers because the Constitution said that the defendant gets counsel. And we were back into trial very quickly, especially in this area. Very blessed to be in this area because in some areas of the country, they still have backlogs going back from COVID, which not a good situation. And a lot of people take advantage of that. And I didn't touch on every amendment. I'm going to kind of move past some of these. But as for the Eighth Amendment, excessive law shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments. We only banned the death penalty for the intellectually disabled in 2002. We only banned the death penalty for juveniles under the age of 18 in 2005. That created a tremendous amount of law and science and all sorts of things to show that the human brain is not done developing until mid-20s. So the brain is constantly developing, and we really have to do a better job in just getting with young people because they're shifting kind of with the tide, whatever they're seeing on the phone, and they need to come out. They need to come out. Next meeting, bring somebody with you. I don't know if you can do that. I don't know. Maybe you got to pay a ticket or something. But bring a young person with you. They would absolutely love that. All right. So there were a couple questions that I got, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. If anybody has anything right now before I answer some of the questions that were given to me, please let me know. Hypothetical questions, you can send them anonymously if you like as well. Love that. So what did y'all think today, honestly, when you're like, public defender attorney? What is she doing here?
You want to read it?
We can change. We can learn. We can grow.
We have a question here.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for coming out. It was a great honor to hear you speaking, especially about a topic as important as promoting constitutional law. So I'm actually a second-year law student at the Ave Maria School of Law. I'm looking to be an attorney. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'm mainly interested in business corporate law and civil litigation, and I'm currently externing for Judge Christopher Brown at the Collier County Courthouse. So I am seeing a lot of that, as you said, pro se, family law, but also shadowing different judges in different fields. So I guess my question is, even, if an aspiring attorney is not directly involved, if their field of expertise or what they're mainly doing is not necessarily criminal defense or constitutional law, how would you, as a practicing attorney, recommend that we, still promote this practice or be part of it, even if we're doing a different field?
I would highly suggest any younger attorneys starting off and serving at least 2 years at a public defender's office or a state attorney's office or dependency court. The need is real. I trained attorneys at the public defender's office. Basically, come on in, let me train you how to get ready to try case tomorrow. Start to finish, we're going. We have a docket of 300 clients in a 4-hour block. We have a trial call where we have to try 75 people's cases, just the public defender's office. in 4 days. So the need is great. They need good people coming in there. They need fresh blood. You know, we're tired. We got kids. I'm like, feel like death. We need people from coming out of law school with some fresh blood. And that's only going to help you. It's kind of like Israel, you have to serve in the military. Like, I'm like, oh, people should have to serve in these roles to be able to appreciate what's going on and provide that service to the community. And you get an incredible amount of litigation experience. If you go into civil, you might never see a trial, or you might never talk to a client. You know, or whatever, or it takes many, many years before partners in a firm be trusting of you to get into that role. But at the PD's office and the state attorney's office, I'm like, you're a certified legal intern, get up there, make an opening statement. We're in trial. And they're like, what? You know, you just get forced into it and you have to do it, you know, and everybody's living through the same thing, trial by fire, and you just learn so much so fast. It's the greatest investment. And a lot of people are like, you know, I'm actually not leaving. I mean, the benefits overall have, you know, when I first started the public defender's office, the pensions and all these benefits, it was like, oh, wow. And that's kind of diminished over time. And the prosecutors, they make a little bit more than PD's office. It can depend, but the dynamics of the market and the labor market it's a really interesting time. So one of the questions that came up, and it might not be, I'm not sure if it was what you were referring to, but the Florida bar, you know, opposing a petition by the Attorney General, who put forth a petition to the Supreme Court to allow out-of-state government lawyers to practice in Florida for up to 3 years without taking the bar exam and without undergoing character and fitness. So that's being opposed by the Florida bar. And if you're in business, you know, I'm not sure how we can make this work, but there is an army of stay-at-home moms, attorneys who are ready to do part-time work. And I'm not talking about 30 hours of work to do the exact same job as 40 hours and you get paid less. No, I'm talking about like 10 hours of work, 20 hours of work without benefits. Don't even get me started on needing benefits. But if there's a way in the market to create the ability to let people do some part-time work, especially in these traumatic fields, you know, police, EMS, prosecutors, public defense, giving people a little more time, because they might want more time than they do want benefits, pensions, or, you know, building an income or whatever. And there's market here for that in Florida. We don't have to pull in other attorneys from other states for that. So that'd be something. I know a lot of people are in business, and this might get the wheels turning. A lot of people are, we have labor shortages. We can't get people to work. These young people don't want to work. There's a lot of people want to work, but not make life work, especially in these traumatic fields that are very heavy. I got to a point after 11 years where I collapsed at work, and EMS showed up to come pick me up. And they're like, what's wrong with you? Get up. And I'm like, I cannot move my extremities. I cannot move. And it was a panic attack. I had a panic attack and I literally could not move. I had to be hospitalized. Great. Thank God for that great insurance. I mean, like, that's the only time I used it. Oh, because it was just so much work. It was so much work. So I know attorneys want to do all these different things, and there's so many interesting things. But if you can, you know, serve out a couple years in those intense fields to get trials under your belt, just to do it for trials, for hearings, to get in front of judges, I would highly recommend that. Thanks for your question. I hope I answered it. I don't know. I went off on a tangent.
Any other questions for Kristina? Christiana.
There were some questions that came in before I from this
good.
group. Yeah, I'll touch on those. About the president's desire about voting procedures and paper ballots. So that's probably not going to happen. But you know how President Trump likes to just throw things out there. This is such an interesting time. This is such an interesting, fascinating time to be a lawyer. It's like, oh, what's going to happen next? This is crazy. Yes, love it. And so he likes just kind of throwing things out there. But under the U.S. Constitution, there's especially Amendment 9 and 10, there are so many rights that are reserved to the states for a very important reason. So, you know, the U.S. Constitution entrusts states with power to determine time, places, manner of federal elections. Most likely any kind of like federal takeover, any of those things is not probably going to be successful. I know there was a question on that. Another one was how to add term limits to congressional posts. Again, that has been attempted in going to the Supreme Court back in 1995, that states cannot impose term limits on members of Congress because such limits function as additional qualifications for office, which only the Constitution can establish. But you know what we can do? Amend the Constitution. Did anybody, it's like, oh, I guess we could, but that gets a little harder. That gets harder. It can happen. But the most recent amendment, the 22nd Amendment, which, oh my gosh, you probably know this, but a history point from 1951, that was the amendment that limited the presidential seat to 2 terms. So FDR actually served 4 presidential terms. So very interesting. So that amendment, so it can be done by amendment. And the other question was about federal government military being sent into cities to reduce crime. So not likely unless there is a basis under the Insurrection Act of 1807, allows the president to deploy troops in the United States in certain cases, such as suppress insurrection, rebellion, domestic violence that hinders the execution of federal law. So again, it goes to some of the recent case coming out of California with immigration, and the Supreme Court just said, "Hey, listen, we don't have any authority to deal with this. So be on your way, executive branch, because the judiciary is not going to set immigration policy or decide enforcement." And then it also permits it when the states request federal help. So you got to love Trump. Hey, politicians out of Chicago, don't you want my help? Don't you want us to come in there and clean things up? And they're like, not us. We like our city burning down. And it's like, great. Let your citizens see that. Great. Thank you. So he's doing all these things for a very strategic purpose. He has so many attorneys behind him. He knows what he can do or not do, or test the limits on. And to enforce civil rights protections when state refuse, like the desegregation school situation back in 1957. So those were some of the questions that came in. Did that inspire any more questions? Yes.
How will the killer of Charlie Kirk will it be state or federal or both?
I think they're trying to file in both. Yeah, that's what I heard last. So if they can do that, they will. As many ways that they can try somebody or prosecute somebody. Typically, not in a situation like this. It depends on how strong the evidence is. You really need strong evidence to produce at trial, because especially on a homicide case, people know they're facing the death penalty. They know they're going away for life. So they fight. So typically they are going to go to trial unless, for example, the case is weak. They, like the murderer out of Illinois, killing the 4 college students, he pled to life. So they said, hey, death's on the table, but if you take life, however many life sentences, you plea out. And so sometimes that indicates that the state attorney's prosecutor's office might have a weak case of evidence. Is there hard evidence, or could this person walk? And do we want to take the chance of that person walking based on a weak case?
I heard that he admitted to that.
Which one? Charlie Kirk? Well, it seems like there is quite a few pieces of evidence coming out that they are giving to the public, which is not a typical situation, but that's great that we're hearing of all these things. And, that's done for strategic purposes as well. But what actually ultimately comes into a jury trial is a whole nother thing than what happens in the media. So we'll have to see what happens. But the more evidence, the better. And technology has gotten so great. If anybody's heard of touch DNA, literally our DNA, everybody's DNA is all over the place in here. I touch this, it's there, So technology has gotten just so great over the decades to be able to put people's, to be able to accumulate that evidence that the prosecution needs to actually win cases at a jury trial. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.